familiar. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Hi there, this is AlephYa2. Jinzo&Tonic asked me to give some little insights into my Reasoning Gate turbo deck that got me to third place in the recent GFC 11, and I'm happy to do that. If you look at my deck profile, most of the monsters I used are like the standard lineup, except for the Rare Metal Dragon, of course. I play this card because at first I was thinking about using it as kind of a troll card, but when I tested it like in recent tournaments, it turned out to be pretty decent. It's kind of a substitute for the third Chaos Sorcerer that people often run. I found myself often in situations where the third Sorcerer or like even more a couple Sorcerers in hand were like dead cards anyway, and you basically are happy with they that get skipped by Reasoning or Gate, since they can't be normal summoned, and like Rare Metal Dragon fits or fulfills a similar role, but there's one big upside. If you happen to get him into the grave via Reasoning or Gate skip and banish him later with one of the Chaos monsters, the Metal Dragon can be special summoned by Dimension Fusion. And I often had situations like where I would have been close to finishing off the opponent, but some life points were missing, and if it would have been a Sorc that I would have banished, like the third Sorc, the optional one, you couldn't special summon him with Dimension Fusion. But if it's the Rare Metal Dragon, you can get him, and that's like even or slightly enough to edge out a game. For the monsters, for the other monsters that I used, it's like the two Cranes, Air Knight, Demog, and Jinzo. That's 5 monsters in total that can be picked up by Reasoning or Gate. And I like to keep the count low in general, because in GOAT it's like if you hit Demog with Reasoning or Gate, it's basically almost always game over. So some people run 2 Air Knights or like 3 Cranes or something like that, but I would suggest to keep the count as low as possible so that you see the Demog as often as possible and increasing your chances to get him out. For the spell and trap lineup, for the traps I like playing Call of the Haunted, definitely, because Crane is a very good target, like calling Crane in end phase, like nets you a card, and then you can sack it for Monster Gate or something like that. Like call on Jinzo's powerful play, of course, and like for Demog also. With Demog you have to be cautious though, so that you don't miss your timing. So that's like one thing like a lot of people probably don't know. If the opponent plays like Storm or Amnesty on your call, and if you chain it to special summon Demog from the grave, you are not allowed to use Demog's effect because it's an optional effect and he will miss his timing. Then you basically have to activate Call of the Haunted on a neutral game state and hope that the opponent won't chain anything to it, so that's a bit tricky. But most of the time it will work anyway, and yeah, Demog out on the field is always good. Raigeki Break, yeah, that's a debatable card. I used it just so that I have some main deck answers against anti-cards like Kaiku or something like that, or probably even some oppressive traps. It's a very versatile card. I mean, in my deck it's most of the time a -1, a clear -1, but sometimes you have like a big light or dark monster in hand that you really want in graveyard for it to be shifted with the Chaos monsters, and the Raigeki Break manages to do that. Ring of Destruction is like really good to... I mean, I think I even won like 1 or 2 games just with Ring of Destruction to finish off the opponent with lethal damage, and it's also like a great answer to Kaiku and similar cards. Yeah, the spell cards, most are like the pretty standard core, like obviously 3 copies of Reasoning Gate, Scapegoat for sure 3, because Scapegoat stalls you like so much time, and Scapegoat to be used with Monster Gate is like super good. That's how I want to play my Monster Gates, like survive a couple turns with escapes and maybe use one of the leftover ones for Monster Gate, because it like basically just replaces escape token with any monster of my deck that can be picked up by Monster Gate, and basically any hit is good. Crane is a +1, Demog is like always like close to winning. Air Knight and Jinzo are like, depending on your other field setup, they are also most of the time really strong. To Metamorphosis, also like, because 3 goats in the deck help with meta. Meta is like a bit grindier card, a bit more controlish to keep or to bring you through the early and mid game, to buy you some turns. Sometimes you can like make some funky maneuvers by playing Metamorphosis on Demog, like banishing him to bring out the Gatling Dragon, clear the opponent's board and bring the Demog right back with Dimension Fusion. And I even had a situation in a mirror match where I tributed my Air Knight to bring out Dark Walter, which in the mirror obviously is like Dark Walter, a very strong card because it really shuts down Reasoning Gate Turbo. Yeah, I like to play one Nobleman in the main board, because you can't just always think about winning on the spot with this deck. Sometimes you get like an OTK, which is nice, but sometimes you have to win with moderate pressure over a couple turns, and Nobleman really helps like to finish the opponent off in that case. Also getting rid of some super strong flippers like Spy or Moth is quite helpful to disrupt the opponent's strategy. Probably the most controversial card in the main board are the 2 Book of Moons. Obviously they don't really help with the straight up OTK plays, but as I said, I really like to play even this deck a bit more controlish, like moderate pressure stuff, not like just going always all in. And Book of Moon is like, if you pass with like, let's say, Chaos Sorcerer and Demog on the field or something like that, Book of Moon is like a good protection, so that the opponent, if he summons his Chaos monster or wants to snatch one of your monsters, like Book of Moon disrupts that, and yeah, sometimes just is enough to let you win in the next turns. Also, what I found to be true is that lots of people started running Kaiku in their main boards, and like before you can go off, an opponent puts down his Kaiku, you are in quite a lot of trouble if you don't have enough answers in your deck. And yeah, Book of Moon just prevents that also, because if you book a Kaiku, he's like, his effect is turned off and you can just run over with the Crane or like basically any monster. Or like even as an emergency plan, Nobleman him. My sideboard, yeah, to be honest, I didn't really think too much about my sideboard. Like, the Kaiku is a card I would take out definitely for now and replace him with Cyberstein, because almost nobody expects Cyberstein, and like if you activate Reasoning, no one will say level 2. So if the Cyberstein is the next card in your deck, he will almost 100% of the time get special summoned and like almost, yeah, not almost always, but really often like lead to a fast OTK. The Spell Canceller, it's for mirror matches or like plays against like Library, FTK or something like that. Like if he hits the field, it's often game over. It's just against unfair decks basically. the Delinquent Duo also against unfair decks for sure, and some, if I start a game against also against controlish decks, I like to board it in, because I don't expect to win always super fast, but yeah, Duo is just a strong card, obviously. Like the Nobleman and Book of Moon are pretty self-explanatory, I'd say, like against some slower decks. It has to be a bit more controlish of a game. Yeah, Triple Decree against like warrior decks, Solemn Judgment running decks, Burn, anything like that. Whenever I build a sideboard, like Triple Decree is basically the first thing I throw in there, because I used to play it back in the day, was often super helpful, and yeah, didn't let me down in this tournament also. Raws against, in mirror matches or against really fast decks. Mirror Force is something like Kaiko running decks, is an answer to like also to warrior decks and Kaiko stuff. Sometimes I also even bought in Triple Decree and the Mirror Force too, so that I take out 2 of the other traps, most of the time like Call and Break, because nobody expects Mirror Force from my deck and they often like overextend on their board when I have face down cards, just thinking like, oh, it's max, it's in worst case Scapegoat or something like that, but Mirror Force can often pick up like Kaiku plus whatever they have. And at last, I have some general thoughts on how to play this deck. What I found to be a good line is not trying to overextend too early with this deck. What I often see like playing against other guys who run Reasoning Gate Turbo is like they normal summon Crane and instantly throw a Monster Gate over it, and then just see how it goes from there. I really don't think that's how to do it. First off, it's a -1. If you hit Demog, obviously that's great, but if you just get like, yeah, another Crane or an Air Knight very early without skipping like some Chaos fodder, that's like, yeah, it's like you have to, you just need good follow-up cards in hand if you want to make such a play. And what I'd also say is like this overextending point it's not only true to early games. Like I prefer to like pressure the opponent with 2 to 3 monsters and save card advantage in hand, rather than just trying to have a forced win on the spot by going or just blowing through a lot of cards. For some people who play chess, it's quite similar situations there. If you have like a winning position or like have a big advantage, and yeah, you should just keep on your winning position, play some couple strong moves, and just win naturally with what you have, instead of just forcing with some risky maneuvers in the next few turns to checkmate the opponent. That would also often lead to a position where you even end up losing if you want it too badly. I'd say like the GFC 11 video on YouTube from goatfromit.com that shows my match at the second video at hour 5 and minute 13 illustrates my style pretty well. I think there was a point where like the commentators were unsure why I didn't go for another Monster Gate over to Escape Token to try to finish my opponent off, but I just wanted to keep the board under control, pressure my opponent with Demog and 1 or 2 more monsters, and kept my 6 cards in hand to I think my opponent had like 4 or 5. And took me a couple turns to win, but it was in my opinion a pretty safe win. And yeah, even if my opponent would have cleared the board, I still had some backup Dimension Fusion or some similar cards just to bring up the board like again and pressure him again with 2 to 3 monsters. And like this, even most of the slow decks don't really have like that many cards to answer such a strong field like couple turns in a row. What I also don't really like is when I go first in a match to start with reasoning, I would also never do that. Ideally, I'd like to pass with a scapegoat face down, protect me or even activate an end phase, and just go off from there with monster gates or reasonings, or basically just wait until my opponent has something in the field and then go off when I'm allowed to attack. Because just passing first turn with 1 or 2 monsters without having an attack made is like, it's a waste of the tempo cards in my opinion. Yeah. And that's basically all I have to say. Those last strategies are like pretty important, I'd say. If you try to throw everything at the table at first, you won't really get far. You will have a couple of impressive and fast wins, but if you don't get the win, you're out of cards way too fast, and most chaos decks or similar will crush you in the following turns. So in my opinion, also that means that you have to need some knowledge of the game and of the deck. It's not just a super stupid deck with alt win con, super OTK, and super stupid and easy to play. That's totally not true, I'd say. There's a big difference again between someone who knows how to play this type of deck or someone who just thinks it's throwing cards and just going for the OTK like every game. But yeah, there's surely different approaches to it, and some people play it a bit more all in with card destruction and similar cards. If you have your deck designed that way, you can obviously like try a bit more for the OTK, but I think the safer approach is to play the controlling mid game. Yeah, at last, for a shout out, since I'm not super connected in the community, but my brother and I basically started playing at the same point, I'd like to shout out Delinquent, my brother. Thanks for motivating me to play, and yeah, have a good one.